Hello, everyone, and welcome to Locked On Flames. Today, we are going to talk about Andrew Mangiapane being the engine of this team, along with two emotional comebacks for this team and just how great of a week it has been in Calgary.
You're Locked On Flames, your daily podcast on the Calgary Flames. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Locked On Flames. As always, I'm your host, Jess Belmosto, joined with my partner in crime, Nick Zararis, of pretty much every Giants, New York Rangers content that you can find. Today, we are going to be diving into some really fun stuff because the Flames had a really great game against the Panthers. What should have been the Matthew Tkachuk revenge game turned into, I guess, the Huberdeau and Uyghur revenge game. And, of course, Sean Monahan's homecoming, as well as the goaltending just finally finding their rhythm. But before we talk about that, please remember to subscribe to Locked On Flames wherever you get your podcasts. We are free and available on Spotify, Stitcher, Apple, Audible, Odyssey, wherever you get your podcasts, and of course on YouTube. And let's jump right into Andrew Mangiapane. I've been grinding so hard for this kid, like, since I started covering this team. He's great. I feel like that goes without saying, but what did you notice from him in this game against the Panthers?
He was just a lot more present. That sounds like a very cop-out type answer about what did I notice? Well, I saw him more. He was more engaged. They were able to make things happen in transition a little bit, force Florida into turnovers in the neutral zone, in their own zone, which is what we know the Flames want to do, is force the other team into making mistakes, have to go less of the way up the ice. And he set up the first goal in the game, which was very nice. He hit Dube with the pass. And that's going to be key for them going forward, is getting that second line going. And part of that is going to be just Mangiapane putting together consistent performances night in, night out. And I know you're going to say, well, he's got Kadri centering him. Why isn't Kadri? It's a different kind of skill set. That when you're assembling these lines, everybody is bringing different things to a line when you have the ideal line composition. And Mangiapane is as high end of a grinder as you can have in this league, because he has 25, 30 goal potential if he's in the right situation, which the shooting luck is relatively the same. He's within, I think, 0.5% of what he was at 5-on-5 last year. But the thing is, the defense hasn't been there because the team defense as a whole hasn't been as good, and the goaltending hasn't been as good. So for the Flames to really put it together, it's going to be incumbent upon Mangiapane to keep stringing together performances like this, because if they can get that second line going, then the burden on that first line becomes less, and then it really will help sort out most of the lineup, because this team is built on its depth, in theory at least. When you look at it on paper, this is supposed to be a 3-line team with a fourth line that can give you 11 and a half, 12 minutes a game and won't kill you. And that's it. That's all you need, is if you get those top 9 going like they look like they're capable of, this is a really deep team.
Yeah, absolutely. And last week or earlier this week, Brad Treliving made a comment about Mangiapane being playing like a beat up Civic, and I was like, yes, but also we have Milan Lucic,
character,
who is just like a Buick out there, just taking up all this space. But I think the thing for Mangiapane here is, finding that happy medium again, because last year he was going on goal scoring tears, but then he would be streaky with it. And I would much rather him play a streaky scoring game, but still be able to set up Dube, Kadri, whoever's on that line. And, he is one of the best two-way players in the league, or he's getting up there. And I think that is something, once, like you said, once the Flames defense kind of shakes this weird thing off and figures themselves out, he can engage in the forecheck, and just everything. And it'll be great.
That's a really good point you mentioned about him going on the crazy shooting binges last year. I mean, there were multiple stretches where he would have like 6 and 8, something like that, and then he'd go 2 weeks without a goal, and then he'd have another like 5 and 7 type streak, and that happens. Guys get hot, they're feeling themselves, they're more inclined to shoot. If they're cold, they're less inclined to shoot. So getting into a nice rhythm would help. I mean, that's been the story of the Flame season so far, is a lot of stops and starts, sputtering, trying to get their footing. You're starting to see it stabilize now. Like we said before, the goaltending has gotten a little bit better. Last 4 games, the goaltending has gotten better each game. The save percentage, the accumulated save percentage for the season is going up. It's been going up since the first game against the Panthers, which was the lowest point it reached at any point in the season, at like 887, something along those lines. And at 5-on-5, 887. But it's been going up since then. They're about to break. I think they're over 900. I think it's like 907 on the year after the game the other night against Florida. So that's really encouraging, because that's really been the only issue. The Flames have been able to score in a lot of these games and put up 5-6 goals. It's just the other team is also putting up 5 or 6 goals. So it's really hard to win every game when it's in a shootout. So if Mangiapane gets going, they get Kadri into a nice rhythm, stabilize the rest of the lineup. They don't have to juggle the lineup as much if they start to stabilize, which has been an issue so far. And that's the thing. They've really been trying, and I'll give Darryl credit. As a Ranger fan who's watched Gerard Gallant just keep the same lines pretty much the last month while the team hasn't played well, Darryl's at least throwing things at the wall to see what sticks. He's trying to find something going. Like most people were like Huberdeau on the third line. Darryl's trying.
Yeah, that's the thing. So when I remember when Jeff Ward was still coaching this team and Gallant was coaching Mangiapane at Worlds, and everyone was like, why did they not interview Gallant? Thank God they didn't, but like he was able to get Mangiapane going, and obviously he won the MVP during that tournament. But the other thing for streaky scorers, there were periods where Matthew Tkachuk, I know we're living in the past here for a second, but he would go 18, 19 games without a goal. That's a long time. That is almost a quarter of your season. Yeah. So don't be mad when Mangiapane goes 4 or 5 games without a goal. I promise it's not the end of the world, and he will find the back of the net.
Oh, and the last thing on this is you got to remember a lot of his production is coming at even strength, and even strength goals are by their nature harder to come by than power play goals. And the Flames power play has been an issue this year. I think it's 22nd in the league. Last year, I think they were about 11th or 12th, and that was with a lot more high-end players. So, and Mangiapane's not a power play guy. His skill set is conducive to being the high end of high-end grinder, the type of guy that every good team has. I mean, last year was easily the best season of his career. He got really hot in those periods, of those prolonged periods where he would pot, like we said, the 6 goals in 7 games type. And then the biggest thing is finding stability in the lineup. Last year, pretty consistently was playing with Backlund and Coleman pretty much most of the season, not really anybody else. And now, because they brought new people in, they've had to try and get those new people acclimated. And because they brought in new guys who are higher end guys, they've kind of had to reconfigure their lineup around them. And I don't want to say Mangiapane was an afterthought in the lineup construction, but you can very clearly tell it was more about, okay, we need to get Huberdeau going. We need to find a way to get Kadri going. We know what we already have in Andrew here, so let's worry about our new guys first. And as we go along, we'll figure out what we want to do with him.
Yeah, and that just goes to say and show that he can fit in anywhere on this team, and his versatility. And, nothing but Mangiapane love on this podcast. We have been pro Mangiapane since day one, and I don't think that will ever change. But coming up next, we are going to talk about the Florida Panthers game, and of course the 2 homecomings this week, and why one might be a little bit better than the other. But first, let's talk about BetOnline. As always, this episode is brought to you by betonline.net, and they are your number one source for sports betting info, news, stats, and analysis. Get the latest odds and trends here on betonline.net. from football to basketball to soccer. The World Cup's going on. Go bet on. Did Canada get eliminated today?
Yes, Canada got eliminated.
I was going to say go bet for Canada. Don't bet on Canada. That'll be a waste of money. But we've got you covered at betonline.net for whatever you decide. And if you love sports podcasts, you can find those at betonline.net as well. We're always the fastest and easiest way to get all of your sports betting fix. Head on over to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline, where the game starts. I threw it out on Twitter saying, if you're going to the game, are you booing? Are you cheering? What are you doing? And it really was a mixed bag because I think people are upset with Tkachuk. He kind of dissed Calgary in terms of, I didn't really have much to do here. It was lonely. Like, I sympathize with that because of my own personal situation. But, I do appreciate that people were able to, give him a little standing ovation and a nice little tribute video. But as soon as that puck touched his stick, all the love was gone.
I completely agree. That's generally my rule of thumb when it comes to these kinds of things is during the pregame stuff, be nice, be cordial, give them their due, round of applause. But once the game starts, you got a game to win. At the end of the day, you just got another game to win. And that's what's important. And that's why I was happy to see that pregame. He got a nice hand. I assume you saw during the game where Lindholm ran into him at full speed and Matt helped him back up. And that was the first nice thing Matt's ever done playing hockey in his entire life.
Yeah, honestly, like that, I don't know. Like, there's still, like, I have so much love for Tkachuk because of the skill he brought to this team, but, like, his personality, I don't miss defending his, like, ratness that he brought to the ice. But honestly, like, he is a high-end skilled player that the Flames are missing, and it's obvious right now. But, like you said, it's all about winning the game, and at the end of the day, they did just that.
Yeah. That's what it's about, man. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter who you're playing. You got to get the 2 points. You're playing the worst team in the league. You're playing Columbus. Okay, great. We got to get those 2 points. Right. Sorry, Johnny. We got to get those 2 points. We're playing Florida. Okay, we got to get those 2 points. Tonight against Montreal. Sorry, Sean. We need these 2 points. Right now, they're 1 point ahead of 4 teams tied for being 1 point out of a playoff spot. They have 22, and then there are 4 teams who have 21 points in the Western Conference for that second wild card spot. So all of like the lore and the stuff that we as media people like to talk about that makes the human element of sports interesting. At the end of the day, these dudes just got to go to work. They got to try and win this game and keep the line moving.
They're going to clock in the same way that most of us go to clock in at our jobs, except they make what we make in a year in like 2 face-offs. But, there's no point in being upset over this and putting all this negative energy into it. The same way that I saw people today talking about how angry they are at Gaudreau. Like, I'm sorry, but it's been like 6 months.
Yeah,
come on, you're almost there. We can get over this hump. He's playing for one of the worst teams in the league. Just you win at the end of the day.
That's the thing. That's what makes this an opportunity for the Flames and their fans. Florida is not a particularly good team right now. Their goaltending has been a major issue for them this year. Their defense has not been nearly as good as it was last year.
Why? Did we take something from them?
You beat me to the joke there. And then Columbus is dreadful. The Flames are very easily winning both of these breakups. It's just a matter of keep moving. I understand the pain. That's part of what makes sports. You invest your time and your emotions in Matthew Tkachuk and Johnny Gaudreau and their journeys of Johnny's ups and downs and find another 100-point season after a couple down years. You rest in, we drafted Matthew Tkachuk really high. You got to wait a couple years for him to break through and get a chance. Yeah. And then once he comes in, he's one of the great players in the league pretty much right out of the gate once he's stuck at the NHL level. And then all of that, you just got it taken away from you for things that aren't your fault. I mean, the Flames fans are very passionate. They had that building loud on what was that, Tuesday? Yeah,
Yeah.
they were loud on Tuesday. They made themselves known, and I get it. I understand that you put all your time and effort into them being on the team, and then they just decide, well, you're not good enough. I understand why that would be frustrating. The
Yeah.
Flames have a great community. There is a great community in Calgary that really loves this team, and you saw it during the playoffs last year. And I understand being frustrated that this wasn't good enough. Well, you're still going to end up probably going further than both of them this year, which should be the end goal at the end of the day. Like, yes, personal vendettas. I am a very petty individual when it comes to getting even. Don't just get even. Do better. Win. Do
Yeah.
better. They beat Florida both times they played. I think they have one more game against Columbus. Win those. Get even. Go further in the playoffs than both of them. You won the breakup.
Right. And just I'm someone who holds a nasty grudge, and that is something that I will always do, but not when it comes to things like Gaudreau and Tkachuk. Because I understand living somewhere where you have no friends and your friends all get traded away is miserable. And you have okay, you're Matthew Tkachuk, you're like the biggest name in town. You can't just go out to a bar and like try to make friends.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I get it. And I get wanting to be a lot closer to your family as well, especially as you're starting a family. But you know who is coming to town that there seems to be no bad blood with? Sean Monahan. Sean Monahan. Yeah, great dude. Absolutely great dude.
And that's the thing. And I can tie this point into what we were talking about before. Sean Monahan gave a lot of years of his life to this team. He gave a lot of functionality to the ambulatory functions of his body to try and win hockey games for this team.
And
and that's the thing. That type of person who's going to be willing to go through that just to play is always going to have a specific place in people's hearts. That's one of the things that recurring themes I've always gathered from people is that's part of the reason athletes who put themselves through that stuff is so revered, because every single person thinks that if they had that type of God-given ability, they would work that hard to get that far if they were that athletic, because it would be a shame to waste that athleticism. So when they see guys like that who are willing to go through hell just to play, that really does it foster a certain type of respect that not every athlete gets, because there's that notion of they're spoiled, they're overpaid, blah 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 blah. At the end of the day, there's not a lot of people on the planet Earth who can do what these guys are capable of doing. So the fact that they're able to do all of that in spite of their limitations, whether it be injury or just what they're able to do as players. So for Monahan to come back, it'll be nice. And the thing is, that's just years of your life, man. You think about all the years Sean was in Calgary. You think about the years Matthew and Johnny were in Calgary. That's years of your life that you invested in these guys and seeing them do well and hoping the team would do well because of it. And it just kind of feels like unsatisfactory. For Sean, it's a little bit different because he's getting an opportunity to kind of prove himself and get another contract after this one because it's the last year of his deal. Whereas with Johnny and with Matt, it's just like, damn, we invested all those years of our lives and it didn't result in a cup. So it kind of feels like a disappointment. It's complicated. This is the human element of sports.
Absolutely. And, I couldn't have said it better myself. So just breathe, take the 2 points and go. Just take them and go. And the thing here is that I'm pretty sure that Columbus comes to town this month and that'll be fun. I'm sorry. I am looking forward to that. I'm looking forward. They're wearing their Blasty jerseys during that game. So it's going to be an exciting and just goal-filled game. But coming up next, we are going to talk about, the people who are going to be stopping the goals on the opposite end. And that would be, please. Please, I beg you to know how to stop these goals. But of course, that will be Jacob Markstrom and Dan Vladar. And thank you all for tuning in to Locked On Flames. As always, you can follow us on Twitter at LO_FlamesPod. Vladar, he looked pretty good the other night. I just have to say that.
Florida generates a lot of offense. To only concede 2 goals in a game, like, yeah, they had a post, yeah, they missed a wide open net. That's hockey. If I had wheels, I might be able to roll downhill. I don't know. That's the kind of thing. That's why doing the, well, they did this, they did that, but they didn't. The final score was 6-2. The Panthers had plenty of opportunities in that game to make it close. It definitely felt closer than 6-2. I will concede that point because Florida generates so much offense. But Calgary was firmly in control of that game. And that's the thing. And we talked about this in the preseason. We talked about this last year. Just, you got to manage Markstrom's workload. He hasn't played great this year, but you got to get your backup to the point where the backup has some confidence in their game. It's really hard to play as a backup goalie in the NHL. You only get a start maybe once every 8-9 days. That's really hard to find a rhythm, especially at a position like goalie, which is so dependent on being in a rhythm. That is such a hard position to play to begin with. And that's when you're getting regular repetitions. Like, you can say, well, he's at practice. Being at practice is never going to be the same thing as being in game. Game reps and practice reps are very different from each other. So it's really encouraging that Vladar was able to have a good game on Tuesday. If your backup's only conceding 2, you take that 100 times out of 100. If you lose 2-1, 2-0, you know it's not on your goalie, the reason you lost that game.
Right.
That's the biggest thing right now for the Flames is the goalies have been the reason they haven't won a lot of have lost games, have had to go to overtime in some games. If you can just get consistency, if you get that save percentage, keep incrementally ticking it up. Like we were saying before, it reached a low point the first time they played Florida where it was like 887. Now it's up to like 903, 904. That's only a 4-game span. That's not a huge sample, but that's the kind of incremental improvement that's going to be imperative for the Flames to get on a run here, because the offense looks like it's getting there. The rhythm is there. They're putting up 4 or 5 pretty consistently. The defense is still a work in progress, and it's part of the reason the goaltending hasn't been as good, as the workload is more challenging. But there is opportunity here for the Flames if they get the goaltending sorted out. And even if the goaltending is only slightly above average, that's better than what most of the teams they're in competition with. Edmonton's goaltending situation is a mess. Minnesota's goaltending situation is a mess. Nashville's goaltending situation, Zararis hasn't been nearly as good as he was last year. And St. Louis's goalie situation is a mess. That's the thing. You don't need to have Markstrom be what he was last year, where he was like a 924, 925 save percentage guy. If he's just like a 915, they'll easily have the best goaltending situation of all the teams they're in a competition with for those wild card spots. They might even be able to leapfrog the Kings, who are, I think, 3 or 4 points ahead of them. They just waived Cal Peterson, as we were talking about before we started recording. Them and the Kings decided to play American football as opposed to hockey.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. If you can just get above average goaltending in the league right now, you're going to have a top 10 goalie, because aside from like Ilya Sorokin and Hellebuck, nobody's playing that well in net right now. Even Shesterkin, who won the Vezina last year, he's only been okay as opposed to great. So if they can get Markstrom and Vladar to slightly above average, they'll be in great shape.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I feel like, especially in the Pacific and the West as a whole, there's no true, like,
only Hellebuck.
Yeah, like, that's it.
That's it. And Winnipeg's not that good. So
no, and you have to play, like, again, if you can coast by and preserve your energy for the playoffs, you don't need to play at 150% against teams like the Ducks, like, I don't even know, the Blues. Like, you don't have to do that. And if you can just snag 2 points for every game you're playing, or, you know, even a point here and there, it's fine. Like, all of these points matter. And, you know, we said it in the shortened season, but they still matter now too. It doesn't just go away. And the Pacific Division is one of the, I think that the roles kind of flipped this year. Like, last year and years past, the Central has been a lot more competitive versus the Pacific. And I think that that's just kind of flipped this year. But I like what we're seeing right now. And I think it makes sense for Vladar to get these starts in these big games, because, again, he needs to find his rhythm. And tonight, Markstrom's in net against the Habs.
Golden opportunity.
Yeah, he just has to find himself. They both have to find themselves a way to muscle memory and everything. I'm not a goaltender. I played goaltender in U12 soccer and U5, whatever, but that's it. No one was kicking the ball towards me. But I think that you just, you have the basic mechanics and fundamentals for a reason. Use them wisely. Don't, Markstrom had so many highlight reel saves last year, and I don't think we've seen many of those this year, and that's okay, because that means he's not getting hurt or not risking getting hurt. And that I'm gonna knock on wood there, because I do not trust myself.
Good call.
I feel like half the Flames team is expecting their first child too. Markstrom is one of them, and I'm sure that he's exhausted from that. And we saw it with Rasmus Anderson. His first year that his child was born was the worst year of his career. And I don't blame him, because he was 24 years old with a new baby. That's a lot of work.
Yeah.
And again, that's the human side of it. It's not just blinders on hockey. You have to realize that these are real human beings doing real human being things like the rest of us, but just with more money in their bank accounts.
Yeah, I was gonna say, but they drive a G-Wagon to the rink instead of. Yeah, that's really the only
difference. Their little gas tank thing flashing, saying, "Please fill me up."
The last thing I want to say on this, goaltending is impossible to predict year to year. But this is even there is no formula to understand goaltending. There is no, yes, you can track over a course of a long period of time, goals saved above expected and things like that. But year to year, there's not really consistency with that statistic, which is usually how you evaluate goaltenders, because goaltending is so dependent on what happens in front of them. You think about all the fluky, random, weird goals that happen over the course of an NHL season, where a goaltender's in a perfect position and then the puck hits something on the way in and it goes right past them and they never even see it. It's so difficult to predict year to year. And it's why, even though Markstrom was outstanding last year, all it takes is a couple good starts in a row to get into a nice rhythm, and then this isn't even a conversation anymore. That's really it.
But at the same time, we talk so much about last year because of how much of an outlier it was. You can't necessarily just cut, copy, and paste that into this year and into whoever's game, even Shesterkin. You can't just be hey, you won the Vezina last year, let's do it again. It doesn't work like that, because if it did, there would be we call it a copycat league for a reason, but sometimes you just can't do that with goaltending. It doesn't work.
No, goaltending's impossible to forecast. It's why if you're constantly looking for a new goalie, you're probably not going to end up with good results, because the goalie carousel usually doesn't bear a good fruit. I mean, I've been very lucky as a Ranger fan to go from Hank to Shesterkin, but for the most part, most of y'all out there struggling going from goalie A to goalie B. The difference between Ilya Samsonov and Cam Talbot is negligible at best, but you got to roll the dice and see what you end up with.
Yeah, exactly. And, that's why I'm so grateful that Jacob Markstrom said, I will take less money to come here instead of going to Edmonton. And that's just my favorite thing about Jacob Markstrom. He truly, I think that it was 2 years ago, that free agency was Brad Treliving's best and potentially the franchise's best free agency, with Chris Tanev and Jacob Markstrom coming over from the Canucks. And, both are now expecting children. So that's the Calgary magic. That's the Lake Louise water, or whatever y'all have going on.
As you said about Matthew Tkachuk, there is nothing else to do in Calgary, Jess.
You're not wrong. You're not wrong.
It's why all of the guys in Major League Baseball, because there was a strike in the spring where they missed the first 2 weeks of the season. So everybody had a kid the first week of September, because they were locked. They were just sitting around. Not a lot to do when there's no work. There's not a lot to do as a professional athlete.
And they're well, we can't do really baseball related things, or we can't use our name, our image, or our likeness or anything. So, better go put it to work somewhere else. And congratulations to everyone who is expecting and has had children.
Yeah.
If you need a babysitter, you can pay for my passport. I'll send you my references. I used to nanny. So yes, thank you all for tuning into today's episode of Locked On Flames and Locked On Babies. Thank you all. Remember to follow me on Twitter at Jess Belmosto, and you can follow the show at LO_FlamesPod, and of course, anywhere you get your podcasts. Nick, go ahead and plug your Twitter.
You can follow me at Nick Zararis, Nick Zararis. I never stop tweeting. I never log off. I've put out content every single day this week. I'm tired, Jess, but I love doing the show. This is fun when we get to do this once a week.
Right. It's just, it's chit-chatting with friends, and I hope everyone listening is kind of enjoying themselves. I imagine, 20-something-year-olds sitting in traffic, going to work and being like, this is funny. But yeah, you're always more than welcome to send us screenshots of, you tuning in and what you're doing. My brain never shuts off, so I'm always listening to something. And I hope that this podcast is that for you in some way, shape, or form. And until next time, where I'll recap tonight's game, and hopefully that we'll have some Sean Monahan content, because I love good Sean Monahan. Great dude.